Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. This story keeps getting bigger. The ongoing backlash against sexual misconduct by the powerful. And tonight is consuming a sitting U.S. Senator. Model and radio show host Leanne Tweeden says that in 2006, on a USO tour abroad, she was kissed and groped against her will by comedian Al Franken, who is now a fairly well-known Democratic senator representing the state of Minnesota. Trace Gallagher has been on the story all day, and he joins us with the latest. Trace?
Tucker, the allegations you mentioned come from the radio and television personality who says the growing Me Too movement is what gave her the courage to fight back against a sitting U.S. senator. Radio news anchor Leanne Tweeden is accusing Al Franken actually in two separate incidents that happened during that USO tour back in 2006 when Franken was then a cast member for Saturday Night Live, including one that happened during a rehearsal for a skit that Tweeden would consider sexual assault. Here she is.
Put his hand on the back of my head and he mashed his face against, I mean, it happened so fast, and he just mashed his lips against my face, and he stuck his tongue in my mouth so fast. I remember I pushed him off with my hands, and I said, if you ever do that to me again, I'm not going to be so nice about it the second time.
The second incident is this picture taken on a plane ride home from the tour where she claims that Al Franken groped her while she was asleep. Al Franken says he doesn't recall the rehearsal incident the way Tweeden does, but he did apologize, saying, and I'm quoting, "I respect women. I don't respect men who don't, and that fact that my own actions have given people a good reason to doubt that makes me feel ashamed." As for the photograph, Franken says, quote, "I don't know what was in my head when I took that picture, and it doesn't matter. There's no excuse. I look at it now and I feel disgusted with myself." Democratic leaders immediately called for a Senate Ethics Committee investigation, with Chuck Schumer saying, quote, "Sexual harassment is never acceptable and must not be tolerated. I hope and expect that the Ethics Committee will fully investigate this troubling incident, as they should with any credible allegation of sexual harassment." Al Franken says that he will fully cooperate with the investigation, though Politico is now reporting there's already talk among some Democrats that because the picture we showed you earlier is so damaging, that Al Franken might be forced to resign. Tucker.
Trace Gallagher from L.A. Thanks a lot, Trace. Chadwick Moore is a journalist and a frequent guest on the show. He joins us from New York tonight. So, Chadwick, I know Al Franken pretty well. I've known him for a long time. I've honestly never thought of him as a sexual harasser. I have thought of him a lot as not a very nice person who, and this is an open secret in Washington, who mistreats his staff. He's a screamer, who takes credit for other people's work. He's basically horrible to those beneath him. And all of that, and I've seen it, has been excused for many years because his politics are mainstream politics here. He's a liberal. And I see this as a theme. Like, if you have the right politics, you get away with kind of whatever you want. You're excused by the left. Am I making that up in my mind?
You certainly aren't making that up in your mind. That is how it is. Look at Hollywood. Look at everything that's happening now. All these allegations that are coming down, and even just aside from basic hypocrisy, right? We have everyone on the left, especially who's coming after Roy Moore, who's been coming after Roy Moore. Now, you know, when it's their own team, they don't know what to do. This isn't merely hypocrisy. There's something far more sinister, I believe, happening on the left when they've built a party platform that basically tells people, like women, like gays, like blacks, that you're victims and we're here to protect you, and the other side hates you. And then what happens when people come out, especially in these allegations now? Well, sometimes the women are attacked by the left. You know, Joy Behar famously called Bill Clinton's accusers tramps. So it becomes even more sinister when you realize that they don't care about these people, about these groups that they purport to be standing up for. They only care about one thing, and that one thing is power.
Yeah, accumulating power. I've always thought that the root of all wisdom was knowing how flawed you are, and that's a hedge against self-righteousness. But I've noticed, and particularly in the case of Al Franken, an overweening self-righteousness. I mean, Franken is the first one to stand up in a hearing and lecture people about how he's a lot better than they are. Do you see a connection between outward expressions of self-righteousness and people's secret personal behavior? Am I imagining that too?
I absolutely agree with you. I heard someone say the other day, as soon as you hear a man call himself a feminist, you can start the clock on the rape charges. I believe it was Milo Yiannopoulos who said that. It's absolutely true. The more you're virtue signaling, you see this a lot with race, right? And I've noticed this my entire life. You see this a lot with these sort of white liberal race virtue signalers who are all day long talking about Black Lives Matter, yet they're the first person to cross the street if a black man's walking towards them late at night. They're the first person to be, very rude to their brown-skinned nanny or what have you. It's so obvious that there's some sort of cover going here. When you see someone who's trying so hard to virtue signal that they care for people, these groups of people, well, maybe you should look at that. If they need to collectivize people like that.
It's true. I once asked Al Sharpton if he was a bigot, and he said to me in a moment of candor, he said, the only group I really don't like, white liberals, because they patronize me. And I thought that, there's something to this. I'm not a shrink, so I don't fully understand the syndrome here, but it's related. People who have thoughts they're ashamed of tend to attack other people and accuse them of having those thoughts.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And that spans the gamut when, people who maybe are a little too puritanical and some things turn out to have the nastiest secrets behind their closet as well, Yeah.
And so I would say Senator Franken is in that category. Chadwick, thank you. That was insightful. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you.
Well, the accusations against Senator Franken overshadow what could be an even bigger story. Congress has known about sexual misconduct and other kinds of misconduct by its members for years and has doled out your money, taxpayer cash, to keep it quiet. A group called the Office of Compliance has handed out more than $15 million to settle 260 alleged cases of sexual harassment, gender discrimination, and other wrongdoing by members of Congress. Jason Chaffetz was chairman of the House Oversight Committee, which monitors situations like this. He's now a Fox News contributor and joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks a lot for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me on. A disgusting topic, but I'm glad you're covering it.
It is, and I don't want to fall into assuming people are guilty or self-righteousness, which I think is a natural byproduct of discussing things like this. But one thing I think we can all agree on is that Congress shouldn't be using taxpayer money to settle cases like this and then kind of keep it from public view. Why is this the arrangement up there?
No, look, we need to maximize the transparency so people can see what's happening. And I just believe that people should be held accountable. Why, if you're breaking the law by engaging in, say, sexual harassment, why should the people of Kansas or Utah or Florida have to reach in their pockets to pay off a settlement for something that you did? The members should be responsible for that.
Well, that's exactly it. And look, not everyone accused is guilty, and I think we should always remember that.
Right.
On the other hand, if you're accused by one of your staff of mistreatment, that's kind of between you and your staff member. The Congress is not a company. Shareholders are on the hook. Why don't the members pay these settlements?
Well, and look, you also have, in large part, Washington, D.C., the congressional offices are run by a bunch of 20-year-olds because there's so many interns and people who fresh out of college. But would you want to send your son or daughter into an office where they've had to settle a case for sexual harassment? These offices are pretty small. In the House of Representatives, you have 6 or 7 people working in there. It's not a very big place in the individual office. So I think they need to maximize that transparency, which they can do if they choose to do. They need to, I believe in the principle of restitution. They should have to pay for it themselves if they broke it or committed, something against the law. And then they should give some exposure to new employees who are coming in so they're not stepping into a bad situation.
So, but how has this been able to persist for so long? I mean, we've had sexual assault scandals on the Hill. They had to shut the Page School down because members were molesting the Pages long before you got there, but 30 years ago. So why have members been able to dip into taxpayer money to settle these?
I have no good excuse for it. I got to tell you, I haven't had a whole lot of visibility on it. When we had things happen, we've had members, the 8.5 years that I was there, we had one member on the Republican side of the aisle was shooting selfies with his shirt off. But the moment John Boehner heard about that, he called him in, and the guy resigned within a couple of hours. We had another person on the Democratic side of the aisle. Remember where they had the tickle fights? They were having tickle fights with their staff members, and it went on for a couple of weeks until the person finally resigned.
Policy-related tickle fights or non-policy-related tickle fights?
It's just disgusting. I mean, I can't explain it, Tucker. I can't.
Congressman, thank you for that perspective. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, the feds just rounded up close to 200 MS-13 gang members in the United States illegally. So why are mayors of a bunch of cities across this land still fighting against enforcement of American immigration law? We'll talk to one of those mayors next. The administration announced another advance in its war against the gang MS-13. In an operation called Raging Bull, federal agents rounded up 267 alleged MS-13 members in the U.S. and in El Salvador. In this country, 198 of the alleged gang members were foreigners. 193 of them were here illegally. 193 out of 198. 64 of those illegal immigrants arrived in the U.S. as unaccompanied minors, which current American law blocks the expedited removal of, even when they are caught at the border. Those recent arrests ought to be proof enough that illegal immigrant crime is a real issue in this country. Ask anyone who lives in an immigrant community and suffers from it. But the federal government is still having a pretty hard time getting local law enforcement to help them fight it. Yesterday, the Department of Justice sent letters to 29 cities, counties, and states warning them they need to do more to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement or lose access to federal grants. Kathy Sheehan is the mayor of Albany, New York, the state capital. It's one of 29 jurisdictions targeted. She joins us tonight. Mayor, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
So if the overwhelming, almost every single MS-13 member, almost, caught in this country is here illegally, and this is, I think everyone would agree, one of the most dangerous gangs in the country, one of the biggest threats to immigrant communities in the country, isn't this all the proof we need that our immigration policy has a direct effect on crime?
Well, I think that it's great when you have federal law enforcement step in and assist localities in ensuring that federal immigration laws are enforced. And so when you look at that as an example, you know, that's an example of where there was cooperation, and public safety is paramount to every mayor across this city. And that's what we're looking for in our municipalities.
But a sanctuary city, by definition, offers sanctuary to people who are here illegally, making it, of course, much more likely you'll have a lot of people living there who are not allowed to be here. And why doesn't that help groups like MS-13?
Well, yeah, you know, I think it's because that term sanctuary city means so many different things to different people. I tell people all the time, this doesn't mean that we're hiding undocumented immigrants in the basement of City Hall. And, you know, it's interesting that when John Kelly was the heading Homeland Security and was asked by a police chief in San Diego what the definition of sanctuary city was, I think his response was, you know, who the hell knows? But, you know, what it means in the city of Albany is that we're going to do our job, and we're going to expect the federal government to do their job.
Do you have the same policy for bank robbery and kidnapping?
You know, we are not called upon to enforce federal immigration law. And I'll give you an example. You know, first of all, as a mayor,
do you have the same policy for other federal crimes? You would have no problem, I assume, assisting the feds in apprehending a bank robber. Why is this different?
But simply being in this country without documentation is not a crime. The U.S. Supreme Court has said that. And so what we have to look at, and what we look at in our policy, is how do we keep our city safe? And I have a police chief who I believe is doing an outstanding job in community engagement and in policing in this city. And one of the challenges that we have is that there is an underreporting of crime by immigrants who are here, documented or undocumented. We have a very large refugee resettlement community.
Can you just back up for 1 second? You just said that being here illegally is not illegal. How does that? I'm not aware of that Supreme Court decision. How is that true?
In Arizona versus the United States, the Supreme Court said that simply being here undocumented is not a crime. There are civil violations, and then there are criminal violations. But
it's not a crime. So then why would, so in other words, the U.S. government has no right to deport people or to put them in custody?
But
if it's not a crime, then why are they doing that?
Because it can be a civil violation, and they absolutely have a right, and that's what they should be doing. And so this is really about, first of all, keeping a city safe. Secondly, upholding the Constitution, which I swore to uphold when I was sworn in as mayor.
No, but that's, I mean, with all, look, I'm trying to be respectful, but you know that you're not telling the truth. I mean, look, if someone is here illegally and working, he's using forged federal documents, and that is a crime, okay? And because the Congress passed a series of laws after 9/11, because all 19 hijackers had fake documents, that made that a pretty serious crime. So you've got a city full, your city's 40% foreign-born, probably a ton of people there illegally, and they're using forged federal documents, and you're not doing anything about it. You don't think that's a threat to the safety of people in other parts of the country?
That's not local municipalities. That's not local law enforcement's job to enforce. And so we have a thing called the 10th Amendment. And the 10th Amendment says that, you know, in what's in the Constitution, that is the power of the federal government is the power of the federal government,
but
and
then,
everything
so why
else
not
falls
apply
to the
that
states.
to other? No, because
so
the truth is this is political, and that's why it's hard to take a lecture from you about the Constitution when you know perfectly well that this is political pressure coming to bear on you and other mayors that is making you ignore federal law on this subject, but not on others, right? I mean, let's be honest.
But this is why the provision in the Brady handgun law that required local municipalities to do background checks was found to be unconstitutional, because the federal government cannot force municipalities, states, or local governments to do things that they are not within their power. We are not Uber Ice here. We're here.
So let me ask you a specific question. If the feds said, look, we're trying to find someone we believe is a criminal alien, and you have him in custody, will you hold him another day until we get there? I believe under your policies, the answer would be no.
Well, we have always cooperated, and our policy is to cooperate. We follow Section 1373, that there's been a lot of talk about. We work with federal and state officials in law enforcement actions all the time. And so what we are talking about when we talk about sanctuary is that it's not our police officer's job to ask a person what their legal status is.
But if the feds asked you to hold someone, would you?
We're not going to ask them to tell us whether or not, or to show us their papers.
Okay, but but actually that's not what they're asking. They're saying, look, if we know, for example, we believe, a federal task force believes this is a member of MS-13. We know he's here illegally. Can you hold him for us? We want to come talk to him. You would say no.
Well, we have to have a legitimate reason. Again,
that's not a legitimate reason.
Right?
He's breaking federal immigration law passed by the Congress.
The Fourth Amendment of the Constitution says that you have to have probable cause. If the federal government provides probable cause, then absolutely we will hold somebody.
The probable cause is we know for a fact he's here in the country illegally, violating federal immigration law. Will you hold him on those grounds because we think he's in MS-13? Would you do that?
And if a warrant is issued, we can hold people. But we have to follow the Constitution. And that's all that we're simply doing. And you know, the final thing, too, is this.
Hit me with it quick. We're almost out of time.
Okay, we are a city that has a growing immigrant population.
I'm aware.
And it is good for our economy. And it is, when we look at northeastern cities and an aging population, if we want to continue to have a vibrant economy, we have to be welcoming to everybody.
As an economic matter, do you know what? If I can just say, there's no evidence to support that, actually. Because this is something that I probably know as much about as you, and I don't actually think that there is evidence that that's all economic upside, but we're going to have to agree to disagree, I guess. But that's enough. Mayor Sheehan, thank you. President Trump ran on promises to protect America's shrinking middle class. Would the Republican tax plan do that? We've got a member of Congress on next to explain. Heard politicians and business executives argue that Congress needs to cut the corporate tax rate in order to make American companies globally competitive. It's not a crazy idea. Our corporate tax rates are among the highest in the world, even if relatively few companies actually pay full freight. But is the whole truth about competitiveness in American companies. Well, let's see. Jeff Immelt ran General Electric for 16 years. He retired last summer. During Immelt's time at the helm of that company, GE's stock plunged by almost 30%. It lost about $150 billion of its value. GE stock was the single worst performer on the Dow during that period. And yet here's the remarkable thing. When Jeff Immelt retired from GE, he received a severance package that could be worth more than $210 million. Almost $250 million. That's, of course, in addition to the salary and bonuses he received during a 35-year career at that company. After Immelt announced his retirement, Jack Brennan, the former CEO of Vanguard and the lead independent member of the GE board, said that Jeff Immelt had, quote, positioned the company incredibly well for the future. Well, if that all sounds bizarre to you, you clearly haven't been paying attention to the way big American companies are run these days. Consider the case of Marissa Mayer. A longtime Google executive, Mayer spent 5 years running the tech giant Yahoo. During that time, she became one of the most famous business leaders in America and definitely one of the richest. How did Yahoo do? Well, under Mayer's leadership, Yahoo's business model collapsed completely. The company shed half its employees. Meanwhile, Yahoo neglected its most basic duties to its customers, you and me, allowing massive privacy breaches that exposed users' personal data to hackers. In the face of all of this, Mayer sat for an endless series of gauzy media profiles, including a spread in the fashion magazine Vogue. As her company was failing, Mayer threw a Wizard of Oz themed photo shoot with fellow executives that cost $70 grand. In the end, I think all would agree Mayer's tenure was a total disaster. Yahoo's core business was sold to Verizon for less than $5 billion. That's a $95 billion discount from what it was once worth. And yet somehow, in return for presiding over Yahoo's destruction, Marissa Mayer became richer than ever. She collected a total of $239 million in compensation from that company. That's $900,000 for every week she spent mismanaging it. Now, in an earlier age, this would be called looting. The media would have attacked Marissa Mayer as a living symbol of incompetence and greed. Angry Yahoo employees might have picketed her house. And yet that's not what happened. Liberals celebrated Marissa Mayer as a feminist hero. She currently serves on the board of Walmart. All is well for her. Remember all this the next time somebody tells you that corporations need a bigger tax cut than you do. There are many reasons that American companies may not be competitive in world markets. Tax rates are just one of them. Congressman Mike Kelly is a Republican. He represents Pennsylvania. He joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you, Tucker.
So I was talking to someone in my neighborhood yesterday. He's a dentist, voted for Trump, and he's conservative. And he said, under this tax plan, I would get a tax increase as a dentist, and all these left-wing companies like Apple and Yahoo would get tax decreases. Why would I support this? And I thought that was a fair question.
No, it is a fair question. I don't know the details on that with the dentist, but I do know this, that what we've seen is that everybody in America is going to get a tax advantage. They're going to have actually pay lower taxes. So I would really like to talk to the dentist and see how it is that he figured that.
Well,
I don't know how that happens.
He's deductions, and he's above the threshold. He's not a rich guy. He's a dentist.
No.
But he's above the threshold where the taxes would increase. I mean, that's
I don't understand that, because all the data that I've looked at, that would not happen. But again, I'm always interested to talk to people. And as you know, what we did today, we had a giant first step today when it comes to tax cuts and job creation. But it's the first step, and we're going to continue to go on. We're going to go with the Senate. The Senate's language will be coming out soon. We'll go to conference, and then we'll go to the White House. So what's still left to be done is still left to be done. And this bill only gets better.
But here's what I don't understand. So if I'm a private equity guy, say,
okay,
I can still pay half the tax rate of someone who's working for a wage. The dentist I talked to, because the carried interest loophole. Why would we be rewarding finance in this?
I don't see it quite that way. And all the data, again, that I've looked at, it doesn't match up with some of the things I'm hearing from what people are saying. Now, having said that, people are going to continue to question, and people are going to continue to say this isn't quite matching up, and it's not what I thought it was going to be. And we're continuing to say, you know what, this bill gets better as each day goes on.
Well,
we will be getting better. So
totally
that's what's going to happen.
But why here's the thing that made me nervous, was reading, and maybe it's not even true, but that the corporate rate cuts are permanent, but the rate cuts for individuals sunset after 10 years. They're not permanent. That suggests to me a weird priority. I mean, corporations are doing pretty great.
Well, I don't think it sets a weird priority. And again, we'll see the final version that comes out. But I will tell you this. We have noticed the erosion in our country of corporate jobs. And they're moving overseas. And they're not moving overseas because they don't like America. They're moving overseas because they are overtaxed and overregulated. What we are doing are bringing those jobs back home and preventing jobs from leaving. You and I both know that the key to success is a dynamic and robust economy, an economy that grows. And I think a lot of what we look at today, we're denying the growth opportunity that's going to take place as we go forward.
Well, I'm totally
and we
for
have
that.
to look at that.
But then why not say, look, we'll give you a rate cut, Apple, but we have to be assured that you're going to invest that money here, because there's just no mechanism for making them do that, is there?
Well, I think the mechanism is if you have a better environment to work in business-wise, you're going to do it here. I mean, listen, people didn't leave here because they don't like us. They left here because it was such an unfavorable taxing situation. And again, I go back to this. If you're going to have an environment of growth, then let's really have an environment of growth. And I think some of the things that are being ignored is the growth that this tax policy will bring about. It just follows a path of success, and that is the way we're having to go. Now, we're going to continue, and I've said this before, we're going to continue to make this bill better day after day. We're going to get the language from the Senate. We're going to go to conference with the Senate to come up with the final package that will go to the president, and hopefully by Christmas we'll have that. But again, a dynamic and robust economy that lifts all boats. Everybody's wages are going to rise, and we're going to hear these conversations from time to time.
I just look at the stock market at all-time highs, and yet the middle of the country's dying, and so I'm just not convinced there's a direct. I want to believe, but there don't seem to be a direct line between corporate profits and the company.
Okay, but keep in mind, you know what? There's a lot of folks that I represent back in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
They are going to get automatically a $2,000 less taxes, right?
Well,
and about $2,300 more in wages. You put that together, that's dynamic, and that gives people more take-home pay. And with corporations, when we get corporations to stay right here in the United States of America and stay because they want to be here, as opposed to being forced offshore, we win. Every American wins.
I hope that works.
It is going to happen.
Thank you.
It will
very
happen.
Much. Anti-gun activists have identified a deadly new super weapon that requires a lot more regulation, but there's a twist. It's been around for 300 years. We'll tell you about this deadly device next. After Sandy Hook, the threat was AR-15s. After Las Vegas, it was bump stocks. Now, gun foes in America have discovered a new danger to you and your family. Yes, muzzle loaders, just like the ones they used at the Battle of Bunker Hill. Former Congresswoman Gabby Gifford's anti-gun group has released a new report warning that muzzle loaders, we're not making this up, could be, quote, the next bump stock because they are largely unregulated by the government. This is a shift from just a few years ago when liberals conceded that at least muzzle loaders were protected by the Second Amendment.
Republicans like to pretend that their interpretations of the Constitution are based on the original intent of the words. They insist that what matters is what the authors of those words had in mind. They think of themselves as mind readers of the Founding Fathers. Well, this is what they had in mind when they wrote the Second Amendment, a single-shot firearm that takes a bit of work to reload.
Jumaane Williams is a city councilman in New York, possibly the next mayor of that city in 4 years. Who knows? He joins us tonight. Mr. Councilman, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for the plug.
What's so amazing to me is typically when you have a lobby in Washington on a subject, lobbying for agriculture, for example, they know a lot about farming. It's only the anti-gun lobby, the gun control people, who literally know nothing about the product they're trying to ban. What could possibly be the justification for banning muzzle loaders?
Well, you know, unfortunately, if you had me on every time there was a mass shooting, it might be every night. But I'm glad to be on here. What you left out is there's actually a company that's trying to jump through a loophole like people do and create a muzzle that can be shot with a silencer that shoots 50 caliber bullets. That can do a lot of damage. Let's say the DC sniper wanted to do something. All you need is one bullet to kill someone. And what we're doing now is actually trying to have a conversation conversation before, because every time we bring it up right after a shooting, you always say now is not the time. And what I come to believe is that we just don't want to have the conversation at all.
So how many crimes do you think in the last, I don't know, 100 years have been committed with muzzle loaders?
Well, once this new muzzle is created, we just don't know. But what you do a great job in, and it works for you, so I'm not saying you should stop. You do a great job of focusing on these single things when we really
you mean
need to
the
have
facts? Yeah, that is kind of my trade.
No, it's not facts. It's just avoidance of a conversation about guns, and you do it very well.
Well, actually, I'd very much like to have a conversation about guns. So here you have Gabby Gifford's group saying that we need to regulate a rifle, a firearm they clearly know nothing about. A muzzle loader is loaded from the muzzle, from the end of the barrel, the hole where the bullet comes out, and you put in the powder, and then the wadding, and then the round.
But what I'm saying is,
and the whole thing takes like a minute.
But,
so it's not probably going to be responsible for a lot of mass shootings.
Well, a silencer
it's so crazy.
A silencer and a 50 caliber bullet means that one person can die, and we trying to talk about preventative. And you don't want us to talk about reactionary. But the biggest issue,
hold on. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Hold on. Yeah, I know you're a gun expert, so maybe you can explain this to me. Why would a silencer have? What does a silencer have to do with the silencers?
Because if you were the DC sniper,
by the
perhaps you want to shoot a gun that nobody can hear, so you can get away.
But silencers or suppressors don't make a gunshot inaudible. You can still hear it really well.
I think they really do help.
No, they don't. I've shot them in a 50 caliber
it's fine.
round.
You
will
know
still
what I'm
make a
do?
lot of
because
noise.
You're good at it. Let's even say I grant you that. But the biggest.
Okay.
No, I will. Because the bigger conversation is there is an avoidance of a conversation of how the overabundance of guns in this country is correlated to gun violence.
No, I'm trying to have this conversation in specific terms rather than in bumper sticker terms where we make gross generalizations and we get away with that. So I'd like to just bring it back to the tangible, which here's an actual firearm that an actual gun control group is trying to regulate. And my question is why?
Sure.
They're the least threatening firearm you could honestly pick out of the full range of firearms. So that suggests to me that people making this recommendation literally know nothing, and they just expose themselves as wholly ignorant.
We should start from the macro.
Guns.
What they do know is that the United States makes up 4% of the population, but own almost half of the guns in the entire world. What they do know is that there's a correlation between countries that have access to guns and gun violence. What they do know is that you are no more likely to be robbed in America than you are in London, but you're exponentially more likely to be killed because of the access to guns. And so what we need to do is
it's actually a fairly complex question as to why that is. But let's get back to the specific.
Recent studies showed when you adjust for population, the number one thing that tells you whether a country is likely to have mass shootings is the access to guns.
Right. But let me, I don't concede that point because it's silly, but let me just get back to the specific point here. No, it's speculative. But what's not speculative is that an actual gun control group is trying to ban a gun that is responsible for precisely no crimes, no mass shootings, and takes almost a full minute to reload one shot.
What's not speculative?
That suggests to me that the goal is not safety. Sure. The goal is disarming the population.
No, I'm trying to save lives. What are you trying to do?
Well, how many lives have been taken by muzzleloaders?
Well, we're trying to prevent that. You don't even want to do that.
Well, I don't think there's any evidence that it's ever happened or it ever will happen.
So we shouldn't talk about it after mass shooting. We shouldn't talk about it before someone jumps through a loophole.
So
when should we talk about it?
Describe what a mass shooting by a muzzleloader would look like.
I said when should we talk about it? If we can't talk about it after mass shooting,
it's going to happen with a musket.
No one will be killed by a musket that can shoot 50 calibers.
If it does. Okay.
But also, the biggest thing, which is not speculative, you won't even acknowledge that perhaps a country that has 4% of the population and owns over half the guns in the country. That's an interesting conversation,
but when you bring muskets into it, it kind of discredits, I would say, your side. And by the way, to be fair, the councilman we're talking to did not think up this crackpot idea that was former Congresswoman Gabby Gifford. Councilman, we're out of time. When you run for mayor, I hope you come back and we can debate muskets. Thank you.
Thank you.
Get ready for final exam. Two contestants against one another. Which one has been paying attention to the news? You're about to find out. Time now for final exam, where you pit two of the smartest people we know against one another to find out who knows more about this week's news. We're joined tonight by two Fox News guest people you know well. A.B. Stoddard is associate editor at Real Clear Politics. Mark Stein is an author and columnist and sits in to host this show. They join us both. Great to see you. Neither one of you has been on this show. We have no even prediction for who's going to win.
Not at all.
May a fair fight commence. Okay, here are the rules. You put your hands on the buzzers. I'm going to ask the questions. The first one of you to buzz in gets to answer the question. You have to wait until I finish asking the question in order to buzz in. Each correct answer is worth a point. If you get one wrong, you lose a point. It's like the SAT that way. Best of 5 wins. The winner, by the way, gets the coveted mouth breather mug.
I want that so badly.
America does.
But it's an inside job, and even though I'm already palmed down, Mark,
it's an inside.
I'm trying to be at the ready. It's an inside job.
Shannon Bream's got a full dinner service of that after.
Shannon Bream is won 3 weeks in a row. Exactly. All right, here's the first question.
She's got the mouth breather creamer and sugar bowl.
We need to do that.
The ramekins.
Question 1. Which tech billionaire bought an $80 million plot of land in the state of Arizona this week to build what he's calling a high-tech smart city? Tech billionaire, $80 million piece of property in Arizona to build a tech city.
I am so excited that we're both pausing.
Mark Stein.
Jeff Bezos?
Jeff Bezos. Good guess. Is that the correct answer to the tape?
Gates snapping up 25,000 acres. Thousands of acres in Arizona. That's huge. Price tag $80 million. 80,000 homes and plenty of room for industry with high-speed data centers and self-driving cars. Are you ready for this, Bill?
Bill Gates, a planned community. Would you want to live there?
I wouldn't want to live in any community planned by Bill Gates because it's like living in Windows 97 for the rest of your life.
That's exactly right. I totally agree. All right, question 2. During his 12-day trip to Asia, the continent, President Trump was serenaded by a world leader. Which Asian president sang him a love song that included these lyrics? "You are the light in my world"? ABS.
Duterte of the Philippines.
Duterte of the Philippines, says Alexander A.B. Stoddard. To the tape.
And at the ASEAN dinner, Duterte sang a love song with a famous Filipino pop star, saying he did it on orders from President Trump.
The orders of the Commander-in-Chief of the United States.
That's the best since Putin did Blueberry Hill.
That is really
that's great.
That is fantastic. I know, he's killed a lot of people.
You know what? I learned about that through reading, and that was my first time actually hearing it. It was really painful.
Wow.
Yeah,
Do you know,
that was. I don't want to see that again. I can't.
You're an old school journalist.
I can't unhear it.
All right. Question 3 is a multiple choice question.
Oh dear. When do we
People
press?
Magazine. Yes. As soon as I give you all 3 answers, People Magazine, which still exists, just named the 2017 sexiest man alive. Was it 1, Chris Hemsworth, 2, Brad Pitt, or 3, Blake Shelton? But wait, there was an honorable mention, actually, and that goes to our very own Mark Stein. I think we have him on the screen. Mark Stein, sexiest man alive.
I was going to say Mark Stein, but I think I'll go with Chris Hemsworth.
Chris
Wrong.
Hemsworth.
It's Blake.
Well, we'll find out. Chris Hemsworth.
Was that inappropriate?
Does the tape confirm Mark Stein's guess of Chris Hemsworth?
Have you seen this yet? People Magazine's annual Sexiest Man Alive edition. That honor goes to Blake Shelton this year.
I don't get the point because I banned it at the wrong time, right?
That's true.
Okay. Well. Let the record show.
Do you know who Chris Hemsworth is?
Yeah, isn't he the mighty Thor?
I have no idea.
Neither do I.
But you knew it was Blake Shelton.
I did.
Do you know who he is?
No. I just heard it in the
But you knew
background
he was
while
the
I was getting
sexiest
ready
man
for
alive.
work on like some TV show or radio show that I had on.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
My guess, Chris Cuomo, but he was not on the list. Question 4, a painting of Jesus sold for nearly $500 million yesterday at an auction in New York City. The artwork was created by which Renaissance painter? Mark Stein!
I know this one. Leonardo da Vinci, as the New York Post put it.
Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah.
Does the tape confirm Leonardo?
The painting, which depicts Jesus, is referred to as the last Da Vinci because it's believed to be the only painting by the artist still in private hands. 19 minutes after the opening gavel, the painting sold for $450 million, the highest price ever for a piece of art.
Leonardo is right, and not DiCaprio.
No, and that will retain its value longer than your Microsoft stock or Amazon or any of that. Your $500 million for that. That will pay off in a...
Very impressive. If I'm looking for a new investment advisor, you're the man.
Yeah.
All right. This is your chance.
Buy Leonardo. That's good advice.
Well, we're going to see if you can get back to zero.
Okay.
Okay, back to equilibrium, stasis, par. Okay, final question. Boston Dynamics, the robotics company, just came out with a rechargeable robotic pet to keep sad people company. The robot is modeled after which kind of animal? Mark Stein.
Based on what they have in Japan, I think I'm going to go with cat.
Cat. Is a robotic cat the answer?
Look at this. Boston Dynamics has developed what it says is the most advanced video. I kind of like it. Yeah. That's a robotic dog. It's called.
Terrifying.
Oh my God. It's nasty. It's 55 pounds, all electric. It can go 90 minutes on a charge.
It
But I
doesn't
have
even
no idea what it's
remotely
for.
resemble
Any
it.
idea? To creep us out. They creep us out.
A cat was a great guess because consider the market they're aiming at, right? It's obviously a cat market, but as AB pointed out, it looks more like an insect than a dog.
It doesn't look like a dog at all.
AB Stoddard, you win. You get the mouth breather mug. Congratulations, Mark Stein. Good job.
I know when Mark anchors the show, he gets a freebie.
Yes,
so
he
I
does.
Feel badly.
I'm holding out for the Shannon Bream treatment.
I covet this.
I'm throwing out my Tucker Carlson dinners.
Congratulations to you both. That's it for this week's final exam. Pay attention to the news over the next week, particularly the weird stuff, and you can play along next Thursday. Well, in news you knew was going to happen, a convict in Massachusetts trying to change prisons by changing genders. The inmate is male, says he identifies as female. He's suing to get into a women's prison. He hasn't undergone surgery. He's biologically and anatomically male, but demanding the prison system send him to the women's prison anyway, and of course, it'll probably work. You knew it. Good night from Washington. Sean Hannity's next.